So it's been 3 days since I posted my very comprehensive breakdown on this Adam McIntyre and Colleen Ballinger situation. I did a huge deep dive. It encompasses Adam's first video from 3 years ago, Colleen's response to that video, then the Cody video, Adam's reaction to the Cody video, and then another video from Adam. I've also since watched a few different videos after this to kind of add to the collection of my thoughts and my perspectives on this. And considering this is 6 hours long, I figured maybe I'll give you guys a little bit of a breakdown about the way that I feel, because to be honest with you, I think that this is a very large example of a narrative that's gone out of control. I want you to understand that I do feel for Adam. The biggest part that I feel for Adam, to be absolutely honest with you, is because if there is a trauma there, it's not necessarily because of Colleen, but really the backlash and the outfall, or you know what I'm saying. The fallout is the word I was looking for. Anyway, for the past 3 years, to my understanding, the same people who are now very much in defense of Adam and apologizing to him are the same ones that have bullied and harassed him. And broken him down mentally on behalf of Colleen, I guess, despite the fact that I imagine she never told you guys to do this. I think it's Colleen's privilege that after they had their falling out, she got to disconnect from this situation and no longer was a part of her, at least up until now. But for Adam, this has become a very personal thing that's been festering. And I think that that festering perspective has, if you look back, caused him to have a different perspective on the situation. The first time I saw it seemed to be a very grounded and accurate perspective of what was happening. And then you see the hate in him, which is totally human, later on. And like I said, I think that it's because of the irresponsibility of people in, I suppose, whatever community this is. I don't know if it's the beauty community or whatever. I don't know, the community that tracks how many times Trisha farted or something. I don't really know. It seems that that's the content sphere. It seems to be them who are the ones that are the primary problem. And now, in an almost opportunistic way, they get to distance themselves from the harm that they caused as a collective and push everything onto Colleen. And we have now gotten to a point where we are leveraging false grooming accusations. I want to be clear. I don't think Adam is lying, but I also don't think that this is accurate. It's hard to, look at 100,000 people and say, you guys caused this harm. And it's easier to say, well, it must be Colleen's fault because they were acting on her behalf, even though she wasn't explicit about doing it. And I don't think that she wanted people to relentlessly harass Adam. We're going to get into the specifics. To be clear, and this is a real question, I do question all the people who are saying that they're on Adam's side. And I'm hoping that at least one of them recommended that he see some kind of mental health counselor. Because if you truly think that you were groomed, that's the way to go. And that's one of the reasons why, and maybe I'm just wrong in this assertion, but I don't think anybody necessarily cares about Adam, unfortunately. I think that this is really more of just morally grandstanding from everybody else, and really weaponizing Adam's very deep, intimate, hurt feelings. And I mean that in a profound way, and not a way to minimize this, because from what I've seen from him, I've seen a very genuine person expressing a very genuine thing. But it's not grooming, and I have to stand firm on that because I think that we are eroding the seriousness of that accusation. I want to first start off with saying that, obviously, defining grooming, there are multiple ways to define this. The first way is the way that we typically talk about this topic on the internet, which is sexual grooming. It is an intentional, methodical process of manipulating and setting somebody up, a child up, for sexual exploitation. Now, a lot of people will say, well, that's not the type of grooming it is. You don't understand grooming. And I do take offense to that because I do understand it. I understand it deeply. And I do. I really try to educate myself on these topics. I know people think it's incredibly cringe, but I have mental health conversations on a daily basis, and I do my best to educate myself on these topics. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that just because my wife is a social worker, that means that I have an educated perspective on this from a college perspective, but we do have robust mental health conversations, and these are the topics that they include. And I just want to be clear, that doesn't make me instantly right, But I would say that, especially considering the content that I've made historically, I try to be very delicate about these situations. And I try to be very strong in my opinions, whether they are received publicly or not. And I think that that's one of the aspects to this as well, because there's a lot of content creators who are not going to disagree. There are many people who do disagree that this is grooming, but they simply won't speak up because, again, nobody takes this community particularly seriously. And I don't mean to be rude about this. I just want to be very clear about the optics and what's surrounding this situation. Anyway, to the sexual grooming part, people will say that they will say, well, it's not sexual grooming, but then they will bring up the inappropriate sexual aspects to this topic. And so let's address that first so that we can say we know for a fact that it wasn't any form of sexual grooming, because it wasn't. First and foremost, we have the inappropriate Q&A questions that Colleen recommended to Adam when he said in a group chat, hey, what should I ask for my Q&A? And she said, what about if you're a virgin? Or what about your favorite sex position? Very inappropriate, right? But what do you think that the desired outcome was? Well, the desired outcome certainly wasn't to do some kind of harm to Adam. I don't think that anybody, that has never been expressed in any capacity. In fact, the narrative seems to be that in public settings, Miranda wanted to have very little to do with Adam. And so I imagine if she was trying to set him up for some kind of sexual exploitation, that she would have moved forward with that. And so it boils down to that's very inappropriate. And it is, 1,000%. That's no questioning. But that doesn't mean that the intent of that was to try to take advantage of Adam sexually. A lingerie, the same thing. Obviously, she was on a live stream giving away stuff that she didn't want, and she sent it because she thought it was funny. It's not. Especially 6 years after that event happened, it's even less funny. And I want to be clear, because it wasn't funny then, but we have moved rapidly socially over the past 6 years. I would say more so than we have the 50 years before. We are in the age of the internet, the age of rapid communication, rapid information, and we are moving very quickly socially. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but what I am saying is that we move fast. And so saying something was acceptable 3 years ago and now it's not, to a lot of people goes, well, that's silly. It was only 3 years. We've moved rapidly. We are in a massive exchange of information. Okay. And the conversation, by the way, about parasocial relationships is very new. Parasocial relationships have existed forever. We've really only been talking about them for the past year or two, realistically speaking. I remember the first time that I engaged in parasocial relationship discourse was 2 years ago because a content creator named Joe Bartolosi made a video about it, and I found it interesting. That's it. It's been that little amount of time. And so you have to understand that this wasn't a widely understood and accepted topic that people were talking about. And everybody that's in the comments and other content creators that are like, no, this is parasocial. You're right. But that wasn't a thing that we acknowledged back then. That is a boundary that's very new. And the reason is because we're in an age of massive micro celebrities. Historically, celebrities were found by some kind of a group or organization or management firm that would operate everything for them, their PR, what jobs they did, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't exist. Now, any Tom, Dick, or Sally can become a large content creator. That was a very boomer reference, can become a large content creator with absolutely no guidance. And that doesn't exonerate them for any wrongdoing that they do. But I think it's important to realize that these are human beings that don't have the same level of guidance, that are micro celebrities. And we have to understand the intent. And my intent is to come into this completely unbiased. A lot of people are filtering the behaviors of Colleen through her being guilty instantaneously, but that's not how these work. I understand it's a very human thing to do, but that's just not how it works. If you want to get to the root of what's going on and the root of the behavior, you have to be unbiased. You have to set aside your personal frustrations and your personal feelings on a topic, and you have to talk about it like that. If you aren't capable of doing that, that's understandable, but you need to be more aware of your own personal biases. You need to be more introspective. You need to be able to operate. And if you can't, I understand, but that's what I'm going to do. And I'm sorry if I'm coming off as abrasive. But again, the topic of grooming and sexual assault, these are topics that get me a little bit heated. And so if I'm a little rude, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be antagonistic or abrasive, but sometimes that's how it is. So I'm sorry for that. Anyway, getting back to the sexually inappropriate things, like we said, we had the Q&A questions. We had the situation with the lingerie. Inappropriate, very clearly no intent to do any grooming. Then we have the period question. Inappropriate again. Periods aren't sexual. It's inappropriate to ask that question. It's a weird thing. She was probably writing a skit about periods because her Miranda character is annoying. But again, what do you think she wanted to do with that information? That's very important. What did she do with that information? It's been years and we've seen nothing. Another thing people will talk about is that she has like a bit on stage where she has kids do stuff that would be considered inappropriate. Again, that is inappropriate. Also keep in mind that she's doing that in front of the parents and the parents don't mind. That doesn't make it okay, but we have to understand, unless you think that every single parent of every single kid that likes Miranda is some kind of a groomer, then we would just understand that maybe those are inappropriate dated jokes. Okay? Keep that in mind, that public perception is important. Things change. Pedophile jokes were much more accepted not even 5 years ago. I think it's a good thing that they're not as much, but frankly, they used to be more accepted. And that's what it comes down to. Another inappropriate aspect. I believe, there's one last thing. There are people talking about in these group chats that Colleen was part of, or she had founded it. They were fan group chats. There were some fan fictions that were, some of which written by Cody, where there was very explicit things going on, some of which with minors. My understanding is that Miranda didn't write any of them. I'm not even sure if she read any of them. If she allowed that in a group chat, I think that's inappropriate. But to be absolutely frank, I cannot trust the public perspective of anybody who's weighing in on this situation, because they've already decided to demonize Miranda. And so it's impossible when you have people who've already decided that this is grooming for you to give an accurate perspective, because simply put, it wasn't. And I don't mean to be rude, but I can't trust your framing on the topic. That's just how it is. If and when these group chats come out, I'm sure they're going to show inappropriate behavior. But again, do you think Miranda was trying to set children up for sexual exploitation, or do you think that she's an idiot? Frankly, I think that she's probably just an idiot. And that's what I've seen so far from everything else. So now we've gotten all the sexual stuff out of the way when it comes to these allegations of grooming. And so now we could talk about what grooming is fundamentally in a non-sexual capacity. To be absolutely honest with you, grooming in and of itself, the word, isn't inherently bad. It's not inherently bad to engage in grooming, except for on the internet, because we load it so much. When I was at an Eagle Scout ceremony, I was taught there were people who were presenting to the young men who have become Eagle Scouts, which is a great honor. I am an Eagle Scout. And one of the speakers came up, representative of, I believe it was the state or the county, and they said, congratulations to all the parents and the leadership for grooming their children into being an Eagle. When I heard that, my first reaction was visceral. I was like, ew, gross. And I realized that's because that is a very online perspective when it comes to the usage of that word. And the discourse around that word is very loaded, and it's very sexually loaded. And what people don't understand is when you say, well, it's non-sexual grooming, you're still carrying that intense energy from sexual grooming into your other definition of it. Point that I'm making here is that grooming is an intentional process to set someone up to do a thing. And what I don't quite understand is, what thing do you think that Adam was groomed into doing? Do you think that Adam was methodically groomed into hearing divorce stories or making content for him? That doesn't really make sense to me, because that isn't grooming. I don't understand the narrative, my best of my understanding, because frankly, it's not very precise or accurate. It's a bit all over the place. Is that Colleen set Adam up for some form of grooming in order to exploit content and his labor out of him, as well as to be a friend in some capacity, I guess. To be honest with you, it hasn't been well defined. That's the best thing that I could come up with, that she groomed him for content. I don't even know how to respond to that. So I want to ask a question. What do you think should happen to Colleen based on that? Do you think, because the way that you guys are talking about it, whether you intend it or not, is that she needs to lose her children and go to jail. You think Colleen is an unfit mother because of this? That is the proportionality. That would be the proportional punishment to the way that you are talking about this topic, is that is what that is. I think that it is a very disproportionate thing. I think she deserves criticism, but like most things on the internet, this criticism is never proportionate. It is massively disproportionate. And in an online space that doesn't understand how to define grooming, where we're canceling 19-year-olds for talking to 17-year-olds, where everything is some form of sexual assault, I don't think that the online discourse is prepared to talk about this in the right way. That's not to say that there aren't people who are groomed on the internet, because it certainly does happen. But every time this story or stories like this gets pushed as grooming, people sit on the sidelines and go, huh, and they care less about actual grooming victims. That's a fact. That is a fact. I want to remind you, Adams, I don't think, is pushing any false allegation, but he happens to be wrong about this when it comes to himself. I know that sounds horrible, but again, I think that we're in a very new internet age, and the feelings, which quite possibly are traumatic feelings, aren't because of Colleen. Once again, it's because of the backlash over the past 3 years of him constantly getting shit on. Anyway, regardless of what you want to define as grooming, we need to understand this. There is a difference between being a person that is manipulative and creating a relationship through manipulation to extort something. I think that it's not unreasonable to say that in this inappropriate relationship that Colleen has with Adam, she may manipulate him in some capacity. There's a possibility there, though I think that that's overblown. However, that is different from explicitly creating a relationship with the intention to manipulate, right? I'm sure all of you have had shitty manipulative friends before, but it doesn't mean they created their relationship to manipulate you. They just happen to be people that are manipulative. Now, again, maybe that's Colleen. Possible. I don't know that I've necessarily seen that, but that is very explicitly different from actively grooming someone in some capacity. Because what you're claiming is that she just saw Adam and decided to target this young man, this kid at the time, because she wanted to take advantage of him from the start, when it's more likely that she just had an interaction with her fans because she liked being a micro celebrity. She liked that people liked her. She liked the positive attention, and that is inappropriate because of a parasocial relationship, specifically with young fans. Doesn't make her some kind of a manipulative groomer at all. Adam has been very upfront and honest about everything. He gives us the facts of every single situation as you look at the way that he describes each and every point where he says that he was just manipulated. In fact, his claim is that Colleen never had any intention of following through on any promise that she's ever made. And then as he's recounting the story, each and every single time he recounts it, he gives a valid reason as to why Colleen doesn't follow through on a perceived promise. So, here's the first thing I want to establish. If you rewatch the first video that Adam makes, which I think is the best video, the most honest interpretation of what's going on, you come to understand a few things. First of which is that Adam loves Colleen a lot, and I think that he still does. He loved her in the past as a content creator, and I think that he still does, because as I saw a specific tweet on social media, on his Twitter, that is like, I will stop talking about this topic, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he expresses that he will stop talking about this topic if Colleen privately and publicly apologizes. That by itself to a lot of people probably doesn't mean a lot. To me, it possibly signals that he still has a level of, and I'm going to go as far as to say, a possible obsession with Colleen, where it's more about some form of validation from her rather than it is about any kind of an apology or anything like that, some kind of a recognition. That doesn't mean that Adam's a bad person, because this relationship started when basically, at least his relationship with her, started at age 11. When he started to be a huge fan of her. 11 years old, and by 13 and 14, he started making Twitter fan pages, Instagram fan pages. By 14, they also became more personally friends. However, if you listen to Adam talk, he says, I thought we were really good friends, but at least, or he says he expresses, we were really good friends, or at least I thought. And part of me does question how big of friends they were. Though, of course, with her venting about her divorce or being catty about it, it seems like they had a bit more of a friendship. However, it's possible that he invested a lot of energy into it, which makes sense. I think that the way that I see Adam talk about this, it seems like there is a mythology to her, to Colleen, from Adam's perspective. He seems to look at her as some kind of a deity. And this is where these parasocial type relationships get into, where we realize that you shouldn't really be friends with underage fans, especially. Though I think it can be appropriate to be friends with fans of age, of course. But it can be inappropriate because I think young people can have a very hard time differentiating celebrities from actual people, because celebrities are actual people. But I think that there can be an unhealthy relationship that's developed there. Another thing that I think is very important to acknowledge is that Adam comments that the parents thought that this was a good thing when they first started talking. Without the other stuff, it changes, and we'll get to that. But fundamentally speaking, Adam's parents, who seem to be good parents, were happy, not just okay with, but happy from what he expresses about their friendship, stating that they thought it was really nice that a big content creator would be active with their fans. Now, this doesn't make what Colleen did appropriate, but what it shows us is that the mentality from people, adults, at that time, 6 years ago, was that this type of behavior was acceptable. Do I think it is? No, I don't. But we're also 6 years later, again, after a massive amount of social change has happened. And so if we're going to fault Colleen for being some kind of a groomer specifically because she started talking to an underage fan non-sexually, that means that you would have to think that Adam's parents were okay with grooming, which they're very clearly not. That's the only point, is that fundamentally, I have an issue with this relationship. Neither the parents nor Colleen did, and the societal atmosphere at the time probably wasn't too much against it either, because we weren't very educated about parasocial relationships. As time went on, obviously things got a little bit bizarre. But to recap, let's kind of finish. Let's just get through the fallout first, and then we'll go back to the other situations. When we hit the fallout of this particular topic, it seems to be that Adam was promised an internship and possibly an actual job if things went really well. Adam's perspective now is that he was never actually ever going to get a full job, and he believes that he was just being manipulated for content. Frankly, while it is possible, based on what we know, it's very unlikely. Wildly unlikely, in fact. And the reason for this is very clear. Their relationship ending has an excuse to it. There's a reason to it. And it is that they had a situation where Adam had posted a tweet on Miranda's account, right? Because he reached out to her, or she reached out to him in some capacity to revive the Miranda Sings account. And Adam had made some kind of a queer baiting tweet or whatever. Doesn't really matter because it's not Adam's fault. It's Miranda's fault. She co-signed it and allowed it to go through. But that's what happened. Then it seemed like Miranda was venting to him after she got a lot of backlash, and it does seem that she suggested that it was his fault in some capacity by saying, I would have never tweeted something like this. Now, I don't know if she intentionally tried to shame him or make him feel bad. It's quite possible that she was just venting it in some kind of a weird manic or hysterical state, because she seems to be a very sensitive person, and I say that in a bad way, that can't handle her own shit publicly. However, that doesn't show this, and then they had it fall out of their relationship. To be absolutely honest with you, it seemed like if you look at the DMs, Adam was the one who ended the relationship, or at least that's what was most possibly conferred from that. Think about it. He reached out and he said something along the lines of, I logged out of all your accounts. Don't worry, you'll get through this. That was I'm paraphrasing, but basically what he said. And it's very possible that that signals to Miranda that he's quitting. That's a very normal human thing. Either way, regardless of how much of an asshole Miranda is in this situation, it was very clear to me that things ended because of that, not because she had no intention of ever actually paying him to revive the Miranda Sings. And that's very important, because that intentionality, while it's being told to us is some form of manipulation, it's very clear that things just fell apart, right? Now, of course, we get to the Cody video, and of course, we're going to get to some of the other specifics, don't worry. But the Cody video comes out where Cody basically co-ops all of Adam's frustrations and angers on the topic, and she is self-admittedly a clout chaser who wants to be like Trisha Paytas and says provocative things for attention, and that's the video she made. When she comes out, she expresses some kind of perspective that we all, for some reason, the public narrative still embraces, despite the fact that we don't embrace Cody, that Miranda was a massively manipulative person that reached out to Cody to have her make a hit piece on Adam to destroy his credibility. But if you actually read what's being said, this is how the timeline goes, right? In the fallout between Adam and Colleen, Adam's mother chews her out, says, don't talk about my kid anymore, right? And so after that, Adam decides to make a video talking about his relationship with Colleen, which I think is perfectly within his wheelhouse, which puts Miranda, and this is the most logical understanding of the situation, the most unbiased perspective, causes Miranda to be put into a weird spot where she doesn't feel like she can respond, and also because it would have disrespect the wishes of Adam's mother. That is the most unbiased perspective. You could say, you're being too charitable, Papa Gut. No, I'm not. I'm not being too charitable. I don't care about Miranda Sings. She means nothing to me. I wouldn't be talking about this topic unless it was being overloaded with a grooming allegation or a grooming narrative, because I think that is toxic to the public hive mind in this conversation. I don't care about Colleen. As far as I'm concerned, she's an irrelevant loser. I don't give a shit about her. I tend to like Adam. He seems like a nice guy. But this isn't about some kind of biased perspective where I love Colleen so much I want her career to continue. This literally has everything to do with a false grooming allegation. That is my primary perspective here. And I think that needs to be handled with the delicacy it deserves, because that is an intense accusation. That being said, Miranda, feeling like she's put into some kind of a situation, reaches out, I'm assuming maybe to more people, but specifically to Cody to give a little bit more context, which was the last bit of her interaction between her and Adam. Now, it's quite possible that she was reaching out to people to make a response for her because she didn't feel like she could make the response. You could consider that manipulative, but this doesn't make it grooming. This is probably the only potentially manipulative thing that she does in this situation. I think it's cowardly, but that doesn't make her some kind of a groomer. To be honest with you, she probably feels like she was put in a situation where she couldn't talk about it, and she gets upset. Thankfully, she finally does respond to it, but it's unreasonable to think that based on this one perspective, which you all are basing it off of, she's this massively horrible, manipulative person, because pretty much all the other context was out there before this. Anyway, Cody's response to that is, oh, I will make a hit piece and destroy Adam. And then Miranda follows up by saying, I would rather respect the mother's wishes, and stops talking to her. Of course, only talking to her again after Cody made some kind of video about the bad things Miranda did from the perspective of her jokes being shitty and edgy. Again, if you think her jokes are shitty and edgy and you don't think that she should be a content creator anymore, just don't support her. But the reality is that she's obviously not a predatory person. Cody is a primary problem in this situation. Cody is a representation of the hate and vitriol that was rained down upon Adam for the past 3 years. Cody is the primary problem, and if you aren't going to take accountability for you supporting Cody's narrative unintelligently and ignorantly for the past 3 years based on her hit piece on Adam, at the very least, instead of blaming Miranda, blame Cody, because she's the shitty person. But frankly, there's a bit of blame for all of you who, again, were eating up Cody's narrative for the past 3 years. There's blame for all of you, because while I didn't see Cody's video because it's impossible to see, I guarantee you, based on the way that you guys seem to interact with social situations and social narratives, you probably massively, disproportionately shit on a young man, a boy at the time, who was just expressing a frustration because he was in an inappropriate parasocial friendship with a large content creator that he loved a lot, and it ended because she's kind of a bitch. And that's really what happened here. And you guys took it and you ran with it and you shit on this poor kid for 3 years, and you put him into a situation where now he has so many emotions surrounding this whole entire topic that he is spiraling out of control. And when this entire thing ends, he's not going to feel good. He's going to continue to feel shitty and isolated because none of you are actually his friends. You're all opportunistic individuals who are just trying to latch yourself onto the situation and come off as some kind of a moral, virtuous, righteous, good guy because now you're on the right side. Sorry I made this horrible mistake that has mentally distressed you for the past 3 years. I'll make up for it by saying it's grooming. No problem, Adam. That's not how things work. That's not how friendships work. And that's not how mental health works. Over-validating somebody's feelings, I know that sounds harsh, is destructive, just as destructive as under-validating their feelings. There needs to be a proportionate response where you meet the person where they are and you just help them explore the situation. You don't want to overstate it. It absolutely is a thing that you have a profound impact on the way that somebody will interact with a particular topic based on your response, and you need to meet the person at where they are at. You can't just over-validate it. It will be destructive to their mental health. Again, just as destructive as under-validation, which is why you guys should shut the fuck up about the grooming narrative. And I'm putting Adam aside here, talking about the rest of you idiots, and recommend he sees a therapist so that he can help him move through these feelings in a productive way that isn't going to be destructive to his mental health moving on in the next 5 to 10 years. You guys don't have a primary focus of Adam. Your primary focus is how you feel about the situation. Primary focus is Adam. He's the true victim in this situation, and most of the people who are now over-validating him were the ones under-validating him, and you are just setting him up for a cyclone of emotions. I think it's disgusting. I think it's pathetic, and if you're going to call anything predatory, that's what that would be. It's not, but certainly more predatory than anything Colleen did. Anyway, moving forward from Colleen reaching out to Cody and Cody spiraling and going fucking ballistic and deciding to make a hit piece, let's get into some of the specifics of how their relationship was inappropriate, as well as some of the other situations that Adam claims were just manipulation, despite the fact that he does give us full context to explain that it's not. One of those things is his conversations with her about their divorce. A lot of people use very loaded terms like this is some kind of trauma dumping or love bombing. It's not. From everything he showed us, it's incredibly catty, inappropriate shit behavior from an immature fucking loser that is Colleen Ballinger. But it is not some kind of trauma bonding or whatever other buzzword that you want to use that actually diminishes those words, and especially that diminishes those words. But it is certainly inappropriate. In fact, when the parents found out about this, they opted not to break off the relationship between the two, but to watch more closely, which I think is perfectly fine. But this does display that Colleen has boundary issues. Again, when it comes to the sending of the lingerie, that's another thing that the parents looked at as very bizarre, and they became more skeptical. And we know this because Adam tells us all about this. But again, they didn't discontinue the relationship. Now, of course, they don't have to discontinue the relationship, and I'm not placing the blame on them. But what I'm trying to get you to understand is while you're telling us that Colleen, who is comfortable doing these things, is a predator, if you have that narrative, then you have to think that the parents were okay with their kid getting groomed. No. It's insane. It's inappropriate boundary crossings. Absolutely. And if it was my kid, what I know now, I would have disconnected my kid from Colleen, even if my kid was upset, because that's what parents do. Kids will be upset. However, they're not bad parents. They're just trying to navigate a situation where their son likes a content creator a lot, and they realize that despite the fact that she's not predatory, she clearly has pretty deep boundary issues, and that is a problem. Anyway, when it gets to them meeting up with each other or having interactions in that capacity, there's a lot of narratives from Adam that there was never any type of intention for Colleen to ever give him real attention. One of those is when he meets up with her in some capacity because they're supposed to go to some kind of museum, a wax museum, I believe, and have lunch. Colleen, before that happens, changes it from a wax museum to just the lunch, and that makes sense to me. She was on tour. She's probably tired. It really isn't that deep. Anyway, when Adam gets there, they only hang out for 5 minutes. And this is meant to display to us that she never had any intention of giving him any attention. However, Adam also shows us the text messages, and in those text messages, there is an exchange of Adam, where are you? Which implies that Adam was incredibly late to the meetup, which makes sense as to why they didn't hang out for too long. There's also a bit of discourse about how he was 4 hours away from home, and Colleen just left him there at some burger place, which my understanding was actually in the hotel, but they were trying to make it seem like Adam is put in some kind of a situation of danger. I think that it's okay. Considering they went 4 hours away from their house to get there, I imagine that Colleen would think that the parents were somewhat close by. She had to go, I'm assuming, to some kind of a meeting for work. Adam being stuck in either a hotel lobby or a Burger King isn't going to cause harm to him until his parents pick them up. In fact, that's probably better than just leaving somebody in a back alley. I know people, again, are loading that, but at the end of the day, all of that makes sense. Colleen had to go. Adam knew she didn't have much time. And the parents were at some kind of a hotel close by. Thankfully, the mother didn't leave at all, but I think that's because she knew it wasn't going to last long, considering the text message discourse suggested that they were very late. Okay? Now, There's also something around, I believe he was supposed to be one of the two fans that were picked to do some kind of a meetup with Colleen. I believe she even went as far to say that she would pick him. However, my understanding from what he said after diving into this for 6 hours was that he was busy with school and couldn't go. That explains it pretty well. There was also supposed to be a follow-up with 3 fans, but it seemed that Colleen expressed to Adam that it was too expensive in general, which makes sense. Just because you're some kind of micro-celebrity doesn't mean that you make millions of dollars a year. That's why it's a micro-celebrity. Colleen probably isn't massively rich, though I imagine she's successful, and at the time she probably was less successful than she is now. Continue, we have the situation with the merch. The way that Adam talks about the merch is as if that this was going to be some kind of repayment for Colleen, and from his perspective, telling him to go and interact with different articles and different news people, like all this other bullshit drama spheres. Now, I will say that it seems inappropriate for her to direct him in those places. Absolutely, again, doesn't suggest any kind of grooming, and she seems to flake and not wear the merch where she said that she would, because Adam says that he will bring it to her publicly, though it's not explicitly stated that Adam actually brought the merch to her. That was the exchange. Do you want some merch? Oh, I'll make you something. Can you make me something custom, etc., etc. It's not good behavior. Lastly, there was supposed to be some form of shout out, and Adam admits in some capacity that he wasn't very active in her community at the time, and that's why he didn't get a shout out. At the end of the day, this is clearly a situation where Colleen is acting inappropriately, but there is online hysteria that doesn't know how to separate inappropriate behavior from some form of predatory behavior. Even if you think that Colleen is a manipulative person, again, we need to understand and state that there is a difference between getting into a relationship with somebody explicitly to manipulate them and to guide them in a particular direction versus being friends with somebody or being interactive with fans and having them do favors in a way that you might perceive as manipulative. But even in that case, even if she did just become friends with Adam to send him in the direction of, hey, go interact with this drama resource or go get me content from here, that still, in my opinion, isn't an accurate label of grooming. That's not deeply predatory behavior. It's shitty behavior. But the word grooming is so incredibly charged, and it's insane that there even needs to be discourse about using words that absolutely are rape adjacent, because that's what the energy of that word is being used. It's crazy that we have to have discourse to just be like, hey, don't say that. If you guys were just saying, hey, I think that she's manipulative, I don't care. If you say, hey, I think that she used Adam in some capacity, okay, that's fine. But grooming is, the way that it's being applied here is socially destructive, and it's fucking insane. And it's just I guess it triggers me. Adam is somebody who was wronged by Colleen and was able to let it go after the situation happened. Adam wasn't, because the same people who are making these videos in support of Adam now are the same people who shit on him because they never looked at him as a person, but they looked at him as a video topic. And the same thing rings true today.